and welcome to Python Programming for Beginners. In this video, we are going to learn about variables and the input function. We are going to cover some things like what variables are. We are going to create our first variables, and also we are going to look at some properties of variables, and lastly we will look at how the input function works. So before we get started, if you have not yet subscribed to our channel, you want to go ahead and hit on the subscribe button and also turn on the notification so that anytime we come on board you can get access and also hear what we have to teach. Okay, so let's get started. So when we talk about variables, what are variables? Okay, so variables, they are containers for storing data values in programming languages. What we are trying to say is that anytime we talk about variables, what must come into your mind first is a box. Say, yeah, a box or a container that we use to store values. Yeah, so if you take programming languages like Java, C++, Python, all of them uses variables because at a point in time, you don't have to be memorizing values. For example, if you have been paid $5,000 every month and you have to take some of the money for groceries, you have to take some for rent, you have to take some for repairs, you can't be keeping all those expenses in your mind. That means that if you want to know at the end of the day what your balance is, it will be quite complicated because you have so much values. Let's say you have 5,000 minus, you have this 2,200 minus this is 1,000 minus. So by the time you get to this part, you probably might have forgotten what this 200 is, what this 1,000 is. So what is the best way to do all these things? The best way to do all these things is to store all these values in a box so that if you want to deduct or make any calculations with them, you will know that this one is for rent, this one is for groceries, and the moment you call the name of groceries, the value inside of groceries will appear and it will make everything easier. Okay, so without wasting much time, let us create our first variable. Now, for us to create our first variable, the rule that we must all understand is that every variable comes with a name and a value. So when you talk about variables, the first thing is the variable must has a name. The box that you want to store the data inside, what name do you want to give that box so that anytime you want to access the value, you just call the name of the box and the value comes out. So let's say our first variable, let's call it first, right? First value, that would be good. Then after you have written the name, the thing that comes next is your assignment operator. When we talk about assignment operator, it is simply equal to, this equal sign. So in Python or in other programming languages as well, anytime you see one equal to, that one equal sign, that is what I'm trying to say, we are talking about assigning, we are talking about variables. It means that this box, we are going to store a certain kind of value inside of that box. So, well, first value, let me just call my first value 45. So what is happening here is that I have put this 45 inside of a box called first value. Is that okay? Or to make it better, we can say rent is equal to 100. So that means that I have put this number inside of a certain box called rent. Well, you can also think of it this way. Let me get the draw. Okay, this is good. So let's say we have this box right here, and this box is actually a memory inside the computer. So anytime you say this box, let me call it rent for R. This has been stored inside of the computer. Then the computer asks you, what do you want to put in it? That is when variables come in. So you say, okay, this thing called rent, I want to put a number of 100 inside of it, right? So this rent that we have here, which is equal to 100, in the computer behind the scenes, this is what happens, that there is a location that the computer will call it R, and inside that location it will put this 100 stored in there, so that wherever you call the name of R, this number will appear. Okay, let's just prove that and see. Let's say print into brackets. This time we are not going to print 100, we have it stored in rent, so print rent. Let's run it and see. Good, it says 100, right? Exactly. Why? Because if you check here, rents have been assigned to 100, just as we assigned rent to 100 here. Okay, let's try and print first value. So print, please, if you have not yet watched our other videos when we started, please, you can go and watch it so that we all can go together. Okay, so let's print first value. Okay, so you get it. This is 45. The 45 is the rent, print rent, and this is the first value. So yeah, that is what we are trying to say. That is what you are trying to say. We are just storing the data inside of a box. Okay, let me just tell you one thing in Python. When you are using Python programming language, you don't need to declare a variable before you store a value in it. What am I trying to say? Unlike Python, some other programming languages like C++, you have to declare the variable before you can start. Before in C++, if you want to store, let's say, 100 in range, you have to first declare the kind of variable it is. What do I mean by declaring a variable? In our last video, we learned something about data types. You have to tell the computer what kind of data types your value is before you can declare the name of the variable. So in C++, before you can store a number, you have to declare to the computer that this is a number by typing int before you can say int first number or first value before you can assign it to 100. But in programming, in Python programming, you don't need all these things. You don't need all these things. Just for our ability to study, let's just open another page for C++ and let's confirm that. So I'll use online GBD debugger, online GBD debugger. Okay, so C++. Okay, exactly. So in C++, this is just C out, which means output. So let's declare a variable called, let me come here and declare a variable called maybe first value or rent. Rent is equal to 100, right? And let me just output rent. Before I can output rent, I have to tell C++ what type of value that is. You see that it says in function error, rent was not declared in this scope. What is it trying to say? In a language like C++, if you want to assign a value to a variable, you have to declare what type of value the variable is going to hold. So you have to bring your int, which means it is an integer. Okay, let's run it again and see. See out rent. Oh, sorry, I missed something. That is one of the crazy things about C++. It has so many syntax. Good, so it brought the 100 here. Yeah, okay, so that is it. Before you can do that, you have to declare it. But unlike Python, you just have to say rent and assign anything. If it is a a string that you want to assign to the box, which is your variable, you are welcome to go ahead. So let's say total is equal to men, and now let's try to print total and see what we are going to get. Okay, sorry, we have to bring our, yeah, so that, because in Python you need that. Now you see men, but in C++ or other languages, you would have to specify that this is a string before it can give you an output like this. But Python is a bit flexible. So that is one of the advantages that we have in Python. So just as I said, don't be confused. This men also is a value. When we talk about value, we are not only talking about numbers, because let's go back to our box. You can create a box and say that in this box called the GOAT, GOAT, which is the greatest of all time, right? I want to put the name of who Messi inside, which some people will argue, but I know it's well, put the name of Messi in here, that he's the GOAT. If you, anytime you are running a program and you want to see who is the GOAT, you see that Messi's name will appear. Yeah, so this is a value, right? And this is a variable, which is a container. And I've already explained that it's a location in the computer's memory that they store the name of the variable and the value. Okay, so now let's proceed. Okay, so the next question is, can I write any name for my variable? Yes and no. Python programming has some kind of rules for naming variables. So if you are naming variables in Python, you want to start with alphabet or a dash. It is very important. You can't start with any other thing. You can't start with a number like 7DHC. C is equal to there, is equal to 7 for short. You see, there is a red line underlining this. It means it is not possible. Let's just print this out and see. Print 7DHC. Let's see what happens. See that the 7 invalid decimal literal. That means that you cannot begin the naming with a digit, which is a number. You cannot begin with anything. You can only begin with alphabets or a dash. We have seen that of the alphabet. Okay, so let's try that of the dash. See? Oh, it worked. Good. So you can name it or using only alphabet or dash. And when you're naming too, there is something you must be careful of. You have to rightly assign values to variables that you can recall. So let's say that you want to create your monthly salary, a value for your monthly salary. You want to type it well, so you can do monthly. You can bring SAL, then you assign it to maybe 4,400. That's cool, so that you remember this. Yeah, but you can use anything, just that it has to start with an alphabet and or a dash. That is one of the naming rules. And the second thing that you have to know, that after it begins with the dash or the alphabet, anything that continues can be anything at all. Anything at all. Yeah, just that you can use question mark and those kind of things in there. I doubt. Okay, let's try. I doubt you could use question mark for some things like this. Yeah, you can't. Yeah, so just stick to the alphabets and the dash. Just use it. That is how a couple of people use it so that we can all remember what we are trying to store inside of that. Somebody will ask, why are we learning all these things? This is important because it stores our values so that we can retrieve it for future use. Okay. One thing that I also want us to learn before we go to the input functions is the fact that in Python programming, variables can be you can overwrite variables. What am I trying to say? So let's say that monthly salary is 400, right? Let us print monthly salary and let us display the value of monthly salary, which is monthly sal. Okay, good, it is 400. Okay, so now this same monthly salary, let me copy it. This same monthly salary, let me say I make the value 740, and let me bring this print statement right here. You see that this is the first monthly salary, which is 400, but when we come here, there is a second declaration of monthly salary, which is now 740. That means that we have overwrite the monthly salary from 400. It means we have updated it to 740. That means that the memory will no longer store monthly salary as 400. It will now store it as 740. Let us run it and see. Good. So anywhere that you type monthly salary after this one, monthly salary is going to print, it's going to be this. So make sure you know that one. But if you bring it here, I think it's, come on. If you bring in here, probably it will display this one. But as you write the code forward, it means you are overwriting, because the first time the memory will store this, but when it gets here, it will see another update. So this one will get erased and take this one as the input, as the value, and store it inside of that memory. So anytime you call monthly salary after here, after this part, is going to return 740 because there is an update. That's why the computer will see it. So that is one of the properties of variables in Python that you want to look out for. Yeah. So let me just display it real quick on our. So let's say the first time you created this, which is your monthly salary, and you give it, what value did we give it? 400. Okay. So this is 400. So anytime the computer sees this, it stores this one and move on to the second line of code. And in the second line of code, this same monthly salary, we told the computer to store it as 740, I guess. So this is our 740. And you see, the moment the computer move away from this 7400, then it gets to the 740, it erases this automatically and choose this as an update of this. So in the computer's memory, this does not exist again, except you display the value right after this part. The moment you cross right after this part, which is just the middle of these two here, the moment you cross this part and you get to this part, every line of code that displays monthly salary over here is going to be the updated form, which is this. So mind you about that. It is pretty good. Let us look at pretty good stuff. So let's say that okay, so let's say that we have monthly salary. We are trying to calculate our monthly salary. I encourage you to do this as I do it. Let's all do it together. Monthly salary being $3,000. Okay, now also have rents being 800, and we have groceries being let's give it 250. All right, and we have utilities being about 150, and let's say we save about $500, right? Good. And at the end of the day, we want to calculate our total expenses. What do? We call total expenses equals, so we use 800 for rent. So we say rent plus groceries right here, plus we have utilities, plus savings, right? So we have now calculated our total expenses for the month. So if you want to know how much we spent, we just have to print our total expenses. Okay, good. Let's print our total expenses and see. Good. There is an error. I intentionally did that. The name error says that total expenses is not defined. Did you mean total expenses? Well, I thought every total expenses are total expenses. No. When it comes to variables, be very careful how you name it because they are case sensitive. You see, when I change total expenses for small t instead of capital T, you see I got an error. So that is one thing that you have to be careful of anytime you are declaring a variable or you are using a variable. It is case sensitive, so you have to be careful of that one too. So now let's run it and see. You see, it now gave us a value. You can actually go over and calculate 300 minus 800, which one I guess give us 220 minus 2002. I mean, when you do the calculation, you still come back to the same thing that I said here. So that is how variables operate. And as I said, it's not only for numbers. You can use it for strings, you can use it for floats or anything at all. So in this lesson, we have learned about variables, like their boxes. That is the first thing we learned. The second thing that we learned are how to create a variable that we say it goes with a name, which is a name. Then you bring your operator. Please mind you, in programming, when you see one equal sign, it is not equal to. Equal to is two equal signs, which we come to it later when we start creating our calculator in the next session that we will do. Then the next one is you bring the value you're putting in, and I made a display that this is your box, which is actually a location in your computer's memory, and you give it a name called rent, and inside of that box we put 100 inside of that box. Yeah, so we also learned that you can change the type, that is, you can overwrite the value, because right now if we say that rent is now equal to 100, even though we have rent here as 800, and if you say let's print rents, let's all see that after that rent has become what? 100. Did we all get that? Rent has become 100. But when we look here, rent was 800. That means that we have over. Then the next thing that we looked at is how to name variables. How do we create variable names? We use the type of rules it goes through, such as it doesn't start with a number. It can only start with an alphabet or a dash. Yeah, so that is it about variables. Now let's proceed to input.